In 2001, a team of marine archaeologists deployed side-scan sonar off the coast of Gujarat, India. They were mapping the ocean floor for routine survey work. At 120 feet below the surface, the sonar detected something that shouldn't be there. Geometric patterns, right angles, structures arranged in a grid. When they sent down remotely operated vehicles with cameras, what they saw stopped them cold. Stone foundations, walls, artifacts, a city. And when they carbon dated the wood and artifacts retrieved from the site, the results came back 7,500 BCE. That's 9,500 years ago, older than the Sumerian civilization, older than the Egyptian Old Kingdom, older than anything we're taught in school about when human civilization began. The site matched ancient Sanskrit texts describing Dwarka, the legendary city of Lord Krishna, which scholars had dismissed as mythology for over a century. Except it wasn't mythology, it was underwater, and that changes everything. Here's what you need to understand about the end of the last ice age. Around 11,600 years ago, the planet warmed rapidly. Glaciers that had covered much of North America and Europe for millennia began to melt. The water had to go somewhere. It went into the oceans. Global sea levels rose by approximately 400 feet over the course of several thousand years. That's not a gradual change. In human terms, that's catastrophic. Entire coastlines vanished. Millions of square miles of land that had been above water for tens of thousands of years were submerged. Now here's the part that matters. Humans have always built near water. Rivers, lakes, coastlines. That's where you find food, trade routes, transportation. If advanced civilizations existed before the Ice Age ended, they would have been concentrated along those ancient coastlines, which means the archaeological evidence of humanity's earliest sophisticated societies is now under hundreds of feet of ocean. We've been looking in the wrong place, and until very recently, we didn't have the technology to look beneath the waves. Modern archaeology has a problem. The entire field is built on a timeline that says human civilization began around 4000 BCE in Mesopotamia. Before that, we're told, humans were primitive hunter-gatherers with no capacity for large-scale construction, urban planning, or complex society. This timeline is taught in every university. It's in every textbook, but it has a fatal flaw. It ignores the ocean. Less than 5% of the ocean floor has been mapped in high resolution. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the bottom of our own seas. And in the small fraction we have explored, we keep finding things that don't fit the timeline. Structures, foundations, monuments, sites that were built when the land was dry before the water came. Each discovery is controversial. Each one is debated, dismissed, or ignored by mainstream institutions. But the evidence keeps piling up. And it's not coming from fringe theorists. It's coming from sonar data, carbon dating, and underwater archaeologists with decades of experience. So let's examine what they've found. And let's ask why acknowledging it is so difficult. Let's start with Dwarka, the site off the coast of Gujarat, India, where this all began. The sonar imaging revealed a planned city layout, not random stones, not natural formations. A grid pattern covering several square kilometers. When divers went down, they found massive stone blocks, some weighing several tons, arranged in walls and foundations. They found pottery, sculptures, and human artifacts. The Marine Archaeology Unit of India's National Institute of Oceanography conducted multiple expeditions between 2001 and 2007. They retrieved samples, they documented the structures, and they published their findings in peer-reviewed journals. The carbon dating was consistent. The site was submerged between 9,000 and 7,500 years ago. Now here's where it gets interesting. Ancient Sanskrit texts, specifically the Mahabharata, describe Dwarka as a grand city built by Lord Krishna on the western coast of India. Scholars had always treated these texts as mythology, pure fiction. But the descriptions in the texts match the layout of the underwater ruins. The location matches. The architectural details match. The texts even describe the city being swallowed by the sea after Krishna's death. For over a century, academics dismissed these stories as religious fantasy. No one was looking for a real city until the sonar found it. The Dwarka discovery should have been a turning point. It should have triggered a wave of funding for underwater archaeology in other regions. It didn't. Major institutions were slow to respond. Some archaeologists argued the site could be natural rock formations, despite the grid layout and artifacts. Others suggested the carbon dating was flawed, despite multiple independent tests confirming the dates. The controversy wasn't about the evidence. It was about what the evidence implied. If a sophisticated city existed in India 9,500 years ago, then the timeline of human civilization is wrong. And if the timeline is wrong, then everything built on that timeline has to be reconsidered. Academic careers are built on established narratives. Funding depends on those narratives. Textbooks, research papers, museum exhibits, all of it assumes civilization began in Mesopotamia around 4000 BCE. Dwarka doesn't fit. So instead of investigating further, the site remains underfunded and underexplored. But Dwarka isn't alone. Once you start looking beneath the water, the pattern repeats. Off the southern coast of Yonaguni Island, Japan, 70 feet below the surface, lies one of the most controversial structures in underwater archaeology. It's massive. A stone formation stretching over 160 feet long and 65 feet wide, featuring flat terraces, sharp edges, right angles, and what appear to be carved steps and pillars. It was discovered in 1987 by a local dive tour operator. Since then, it's been studied, debated, and argued over by geologists, archaeologists, and marine scientists. The question is simple: natural or man-made? The geological explanation is that it's a natural rock formation shaped by erosion and tectonic activity. Sandstone can fracture along straight lines. Water and currents can create flat surfaces over time. But here's the problem. The Yonaguni structure has features that natural erosion doesn't easily explain. There are right-angle cuts. There are tool marks visible on some surfaces. There are post holes drilled into stone. There's a stone pillar standing upright, separate from the main formation. And the entire structure is aligned with cardinal directions and astronomical features. Geologist Dr. Robert Skock, who studied the site extensively, concluded that while the base rock is natural, it shows clear evidence of human modification. If that's true, then the structure was carved when the area was above water, which means it's at least 10,000 years old. Japan has no recorded history of advanced stone construction from that period. So who built it? The debate over Yonaguni reveals something important about how archaeology handles anomalies. When a discovery doesn't fit the established timeline, the default position is skepticism. That's not inherently wrong. Science requires skepticism, but there's a difference between healthy skepticism and dismissal. In Yonaguni's case, mainstream archaeology has largely dismissed the site without extensive study. The reasoning goes like this: if the structure is man-made, it would require a sophisticated civilization in Japan over 10,000 years ago. We have no evidence of such a civilization. Therefore, the structure cannot be man-made. Therefore, it must be natural. This is circular reasoning. It assumes the conclusion, but let's consider the alternative. What if the structure is artificial? What if a coastal civilization existed in that region during the Ice Age, when sea levels were lower and the area was dry land? What if that civilization built monuments and then vanished when the waters rose? We wouldn't expect to find much evidence. Their settlements would be underwater. Their inland sites would be buried under millennia of sediment. The only traces left would be the largest structures, the ones built from stone, now submerged and eroded beyond easy recognition. That's exactly what we're finding, not just at Yonaguni. Everywhere we look beneath the waves. Now let's look at a site that mainstream archaeology accepts without controversy, At Latiam off the coast of Palestine. This is a confirmed Neolithic village, submerged beneath the Mediterranean Sea around 7000 BCE when rising waters flooded the coastal plain. The site is extraordinarily well preserved. Stone-built water wells, houses with foundations, a mysterious stone circle, similar in construction to Stonehenge but older, human skeletons still in place, evidence of advanced agriculture, animal domestication, and long-distance trade. This wasn't a primitive camp. This was a functioning village with infrastructure, planning, and social organization. And it's 9,000 years old. That's 4,000 years before the pyramids, 5,000 years before Stonehenge. The existence of Atlatyam proves that humans were building sophisticated settlements far earlier than the standard timeline suggests. But here's the question no one asks. If humans in one location were this advanced 9,000 years ago, what were humans doing in other locations? Why do we assume Atlatyam was an isolated anomaly? Why don't we assume it was part of a broader pattern of coastal civilizations that we simply haven't found yet because they're underwater? The pattern continues across the Mediterranean. Off the coast of Alexandria, Egypt, underwater archaeologists have mapped extensive ruins of ancient structures, some predating the well-known Ptolemaic period. In the waters near Malta, massive megalithic blocks have been found at depths suggesting they were placed when sea levels were much lower. In the Black Sea, Robert Ballard's team discovered preserved settlements submerged when the sea rapidly flooded around 5600 BCE, an event some researchers link to the biblical flood narrative. Each of these sites tells the same story. Humans built near water, and the water rose. But the most controversial claims come from the Caribbean. In 2001, Advanced Digital Communications, a Canadian company using side-scan sonar off the coast of Cuba, detected what appeared to be geometric stone structures at a depth of over 2,000 feet. The sonar images showed symmetrical formations, possible pyramids, and what looked like urban layouts. If these structures are artificial, they would have been built when that area was above water, which would place their construction at least 50,000 years ago, possibly much earlier. That timeline would completely shatter every model of human development we currently accept. The Cuban government and National Geographic funded a follow-up expedition, but the results were never fully published. The site remains unexplored. And the question remains unanswered. Let's connect the dots. Dwarka, India, 9,500 years old, planned city layout matches ancient texts. Yonaguni, Japan, possible human modification over 10,000 years old, no known civilization in the region at that time. Atlatyam, Palestine, confirmed village 9,000 years old, advanced infrastructure. Mediterranean sites, multiple locations, megalithic construction, submerged when sea levels rose. Cuba, unconfirmed but detected structures at extreme depths, potentially ancient beyond current human timelines. These sites span different oceans, different continents, different cultures, but they share common elements. They were all built near coastlines. They were all submerged by rising sea levels. They all suggest a level of sophistication that predates the accepted beginning of civilization. And they're all controversial. Mainstream archaeology treats each site as an isolated anomaly if it acknowledges them at all. But what if they're not anomalies? What if they're fragments of a lost chapter of human history, a chapter that was erased when the Ice Age ended and the oceans rose? What if the myths of lost civilizations, the flood stories that appear in cultures around the world, aren't mythology at all? What if they're memory? The flood myths are worth examining. Nearly every ancient culture has one. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh describes a great flood that destroyed the world. The biblical story of Noah is nearly identical. Hindu texts describe the Matsya avatar of Vishnu saving humanity from a deluge. Greek mythology has Deucalion's flood. Chinese legends speak of the Great Flood of Gun-Yu. Aztec, Mayan, and Incan traditions all include catastrophic flood events. Indigenous Australian Aboriginal stories describe a time when the seas rose and swallowed the land. For decades, scholars treated these as purely symbolic myths, religious allegory, or exaggerated retellings of local river floods. But geology confirms that a massive, rapid sea level rise did occur at the end of the last ice age. It wasn't a single event. It was a series of pulses over several thousand years, with some periods of extremely rapid change. One event, known as Meltwater Pulse 1A, occurred around 14,600 years ago and raised sea levels by 50 feet in less than 500 years. Another pulse happened around 8,200 years ago. These weren't myths. These were real, catastrophic events that would have displaced millions of people and submerged entire coastal regions. If advanced societies existed along those coasts, their destruction would have been total, and the survivors would have passed down stories of the world that was lost beneath the waves. Here's what the physical evidence tells us. 1. Humans were building sophisticated stone structures far earlier than the standard timeline allows. Atlatyam proves this beyond doubt. 2. Massive coastal areas were submerged at the end of the Ice Age, exactly where we would expect advanced civilizations to have developed. 3. Sonar and underwater archaeology have revealed geometric formations and possible structures in multiple locations worldwide, many of which remain unstudied or underfunded. 4. The timeline of human development we're taught in schools is based almost entirely on inland sites, because until recently we didn't have the technology to explore the ocean floor. And 5. Every time a discovery challenges the established timeline, it faces institutional resistance, not because the evidence is weak, but because the implications are too disruptive. This isn't a conspiracy. It's how academic systems work. Paradigms shift slowly. Careers are built on existing models. Funding flows toward accepted research. Challenging the foundation of your field is professional suicide. But the evidence doesn't care about professional politics. The structures are there. The dates are there. The pattern is there. And as technology improves and more of the ocean floor is mapped, we're going to find more. The question is whether the institutions will acknowledge what we're finding, or whether they'll continue to dismiss it as anomaly after anomaly after anomaly. So here's what we're looking at. Between roughly 12,000 and 7,000 years ago, sophisticated maritime civilizations existed along ancient coastlines that are now deep underwater. These weren't primitive hunter-gatherers. They built with stone. They created monuments. They developed urban planning, agriculture, and trade networks. They had the knowledge and organization to construct wells, temples, and possibly massive stone platforms. Then the Ice Age ended. The glaciers melted. The seas rose by 400 feet. Entire regions were submerged. Millions of square miles of coastal land vanished beneath the waves, taking with it the archaeological record of these civilizations. The survivors moved inland. They carried stories of the lost world, stories that became the flood myths we find in every culture. And for the next several thousand years, humanity rebuilt. The civilizations we recognize, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, they emerged on inland river valleys, not because humans suddenly became civilized, but because the coasts where civilization had flourished were now underwater. The timeline we're taught isn't wrong because it's fabricated. It's wrong because it's incomplete. It only accounts for what we found on land. It ignores the ocean. And the ocean holds the evidence of humanity's true origins. Now ask yourself why this matters. If we're wrong about when civilization began, what else are we wrong about? If humans were building cities 10,000 years ago, what were they doing 20,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago? The current model of human history is linear, primitive to advanced, simple to complex. But what if it's cyclical? What if civilizations have risen and fallen multiple times and the ocean has erased the evidence each time? This isn't speculation. This is a question raised by physical evidence. The structures exist. The dates exist. The flood geology exists. What doesn't exist is institutional willingness to investigate fully. And that should bother you, because the ocean floor is still largely unexplored. Satellite technology and advanced sonar have revealed dozens of unexplained geometric formations in deep water. Some are in locations that would have been dry land 50,000 years ago or more. We don't know what they are. We haven't sent expeditions. We haven't funded the research. We're ignoring them because acknowledging them would mean rewriting the textbooks. But the truth doesn't wait for permission. The evidence is there, and it's only a matter of time before we can no longer ignore it. Less than 5% of the ocean floor has been mapped in high resolution. 5%. That means 95% of the planet's underwater terrain is still unknown. We've sent rovers to Mars. We've photographed distant galaxies, but we haven't explored our own oceans. And in the small fraction we have explored, we keep finding evidence that challenges everything we think we know about human history. Dwarka, Yonaguni, Atlatiam, the Mediterranean ruins, the Cuban anomalies, each one alone can be debated, but together they form a pattern of lost civilizations, submerged by rising seas, erased from the archaeological record, and dismissed by institutions that can't afford to acknowledge them. The flood myths weren't myths. The legendary cities weren't legends. They were real. And they're still down there, waiting beneath hundreds of feet of water, waiting for us to develop the technology and the courage to go looking. The question isn't whether advanced civilizations existed before the timeline allows. The evidence says they did. The question is what else we're going to find when we finally start looking in the right place. And whether we're ready for the answers.